Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic This Week in WordPress and SaaS. It's episode 889. It's going to be a bit special show. I'm going to be interviewing my great co-host, Kurt. We're going to be delving in a bit about his background and how he got into WordPress. So, Kurt, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the new listeners and viewers of the show?
Sure thing, Jonathan. Thanks. My name is Kurt von Ahnen. I own an agency called MananaNoMas, and we focus largely on membership and learning websites. I also work directly with WP-Tonic and Lifter LMS.
That's fantastic. And in this show, Kurt has a background in working with some of the largest organizations in motorsport on an executive level, about how he had to transfer his knowledge and experience into running a WordPress agency. He has worked in the training side of motorsport. How I'll also be discussing with him how, if you're a WordPress agency, you might be able to present yourself to larger organizations and be treated seriously as a serious option. He's got a wealth of knowledge. I just thought it was time to delve into that knowledge and find out more about Kirk. His background should be a fantastic show. But before we go into the meat and potatoes, I've got a couple messages from our major sponsors. We will be back in a few moments, folks.
Tired of hosting providers that can't handle high traffic loads? Conversio is here to help. Our platform can handle any amount of traffic, all without slowing down or crashing. With immediate Slack support, performance optimization, and a team that thrives on resolving technical challenges, your e-commerce business is in safe hands. Learn more about Conversio at conversio.com.
Coming back, folks, we've also got some temporary great sponsors as well, which I quickly want to tell you about. One of them is Omisend. Omisend is a text messaging plugin service, specializes in WooCommerce, has a history with Shopify, but decided to see the light and has moved into WordPress and WooCommerce. If you've got clients, especially in the e-commerce space, that need to send out SMS messages to their shoppers, their shopping carts, this is a great solution. And they're offering, for the first 3 months of sign up, 30% off. That's an exclusive deal with WP-Tonic. Another temporary sponsor, which I'm so glad, and hopefully they will decide to become a full-time sponsor, is Cloudways. Cloudways is offering a special deal, 4 months with 40% off. You'll find all these deals by going to the wp-tonic.com/deals. wp-tonic.com/deals, and you'll find all the coupon codes, all the deals from the sponsors on that page, plus a curated list of the best WordPress plugins and services that the WP-Tonic team utilizes on a daily basis. So they're all totally kosher and just save you a load of time with your clients. So go over there and get all the info there. What more could you ask for? Probably a lot more on Thanksgiving, but that's all you're going to get from the WP-Tonic team. So Kurt, let's go with question 1. Maybe you can give a more detailed intro about your background, how you got into motorsport, how you progressed into the higher management of motorsport, what life change led to you then getting into the world of WordPress and WordPress agency owner.
Well, I can blame my addiction to motorsports on my father. My parents had split up when I was only 6 years old. And I think the way that my dad really ticked off my mother was he got me a motorcycle. And she hated it. It didn't take
There could be worse things, couldn't it?
There could be worse things. It was so cool. I can still remember that it's a, Jonathan, if you've ever ridden like an air-cooled motorcycle before, there's a certain feeling and a certain smell that happens when you use something like that. To this day, I can remember being 6, 7 years old and going to this private property and riding this motorcycle with my friends and just feeling free, and it's that same feeling still happens to me today. If I get on a scooter, a race bike, a dirt bike, it doesn't matter. Two wheels and an engine, and I am just so happy I giggle and laugh like a little child. So that was the start. And then I stuck with it. I was the only kid in high school that had a motorcycle. I couldn't afford a car and car insurance. And back then, motorcycles were cheap. So I bought a Honda 400. Insurance was $60 for a year. And I rode that thing, rain, snow, sleet, hail. Growing up in Philadelphia, I rode it year round. It's unfortunate, but the motorcycle industry changed significantly through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and into the new millennium. And so what used to be affordable, what used to be, kind of like old school pickup trucks and fun, has turned into a rather expensive distraction. So now to be in the industry, it's not like a end this thing. It's almost like it's become so expensive that you have to make other decisions. And with that, you just kind of stick with the sport. But I going all the way through it. I road raced for about 20 years, toured the country, dragging my knee around corners and having fun. And eventually started working in the car industry, and then along with motorcycle dealerships and then marine dealerships, and even worked in aviation for a while. So I just kind of got hooked on working in things that dealt with transportation and vehicles.
Right. So how did you start getting into the managerial side of motorsport? Because I know you've worked for Ducati, you've worked for Suzuki, you worked with some of the most major motorsport brands and organizations. So how did your work in the more managerial side start?
This gets into a thing that some people might describe as like a life hack. This is like, I should make a course and sell this.
You should.
I bypassed college. My family situation was such that I even had scholarship offers coming out of high school, and I just didn't go to college. I was working and almost instantly got into the automotive service industry and aviation, and just working the hours and, boots on the ground, doing the hard work. Right. And kind of like working with customers and getting cars fixed. So I had that experience at the dealer level. But when I got tired of that, I wrote a book. And that's the life hack. I wrote and published a book. It's called Service Writing in Black and White. It was just a mental exercise for me. I didn't realize it was going to sell, but then it started to sell. And Ducati bought the book, read the book, and then reached out to me. Jonathan, when the phone rang, I thought it was a prank call from one of my friends. They were like, "Hey, this is Ducati North America. Is Kurt Von Ahnen available?" And I was like, "Yeah, right, whatever." And it was them. They said that they read the book, they liked the book, and they asked if I would write a course for them to train service writers and service managers how to increase parts and labor sales for dealerships. And I thought, well, I like to teach. I was already a motorcycle safety foundation coach, so I taught that course. I had my own road racing school and taught people how to race motorcycles. And I thought, I like to teach, I like to write, I'll do it. So I wrote it. Jonathan, I didn't even know how to sell it. Like I called them up and I said, I wrote the course. What do you guys want to do? Do you want to pay for this? Do you want to buy this? Do you want to rent it? Like, I don't even know how to do this. And then it just grew into, they said, well, we don't have anyone to teach it. Would you teach it? We don't have anyone to facilitate the meetings. Would you facilitate the meetings in Las Vegas? And it just grew and grew and grew. And they became my biggest contract. By this time, I had left the automotive industry and working at dealerships. And that's when I had started my WordPress agency. So I was making websites, for all kinds of businesses in Albuquerque and struggling because I wasn't selling things at a high enough, entry point. And then Ducati came along, hired me as a contractor, and they became my biggest client.
Right. So how long did that relation, it hasn't ended. I don't think you burnt bridges with them. It just things change, people move on. But How long did that kind of involvement last for?
I contracted with them for about 3.5, 4 years. And then they had an internal position open up for training. And they hired me away from myself, Jonathan. They made the offer.
Yeah.
At first they said, we don't want to, you have a thriving business. We didn't think you'd want to come to work for us. And I said, you make the offer, and I'll tell you if it's good enough or not. They made the offer. I talked it over with my wife. We packed the car and moved to California. That was my first, OEM level position, right? So I was full-time. I was in there.
It must have been a bit of a cult, in some ways, a bit of a culture shock for you.
Huge culture shock. And people don't understand the differences sometimes from the outside looking in. People think Ducati is this huge company, this huge corporation, and their brand is huge, but their operations are not. So there was only 30 or 35 people in the office. It was a pretty small office in Cupertino, California. It has since moved. And it was really interesting for me. And the culture of being run by an Italian company.
I don't want to interrupt, but I just want to get a feeling. Is Ducati USA a totally independent company organization to the parent company, which I have very limited knowledge, but I know Ducati is now part of the Volkswagen group. I don't know if Ducati, its corporate presence, is still based in Italy, and it must have some supervision of Volkswagen over it. But is the US an independent company, or is it just linked to the Italian company?
My understanding is it's a subsidiary. So there's Ducati North America, and that does Canada, United States, and Mexico. And then DMH is Ducati Motor Holdings, which is out of Bologna, Italy.
Right.
And they're under direct supervision, but my understanding is they do a lot of things independently as well.
Yes, because I think this is quite a common structure. Am I correct about that?
Yes. Yeah. Most people, when they think of an OEM in the United States, like Suzuki, Triumph, you just go through all the brands. They're not really manufacturers in the true sense of being a manufacturer. They're distributors.
Yeah.
So they import the product to the United States and then they distribute it. So realistically, and this might rub people the wrong way, but some of them aren't even enthusiasts for the sport. They could sell toasters. They could sell waterbeds. They don't care, right? They're moving product. And then of course they have the dealer network to maintain.
Yeah, it's their business is business. Their business, they come from either business school background, traditionally doing an MBA at one of the higher MBA schools, or they're from a accountancy background or MBA background, and they're about the management of management and figures, which are very important aspects, but they normally don't have really a deep knowledge or culture understanding of the particular industry that they're involved in. A lot of them don't even want to know about that. Yeah. I think myself that is a mistake. But on the other hand, I just don't want to come out with this nonsense, or they're just suits. I think finance is important. I think understanding the fundamentals of the financial drivers of a business is really very important, and having somebody that has a deeper knowledge of business is also important. I think it's a blend. I think it's all important. That's why it's not easy, because I think it's all important. So you started working with Ducati, which is a legend, is a pretty legend in the motorsport. If you got that on your resume in the motorcycle, it's a bit like saying you worked with Rolls-Royce, Then there was the move to Suzuki, which in some ways was even a higher, I just sense your interaction with the parent company, the culture was even a bigger jump in some ways than Ducati. So
Yeah.
how did the jump from Ducati? I presume there was a direct jump from Ducati to Suzuki, but am I correct about that?
I took a week or two off. That's when I got John Maxwell certified during the break between the two. So that's where I got the leadership certification. But I should point out, like, Ducati is by far the most plugged in, passionate power sports company I've ever been connected to. At all levels. Even the current management that's in North America now, I would still say that they are, as passionate as they were when I was there. It's a phenomenally strong brand and passionate company. When you go from a company like Ducati and that Italian passion, and you go to a company, like Suzuki, the culture is completely different. And you're dealing with volumes that dwarf Ducati. They sell more GSXRs.
Tell me if I'm
Ducati
interrupting, but the other factor is obviously Ducati's part. In some ways, I'm not correct about this because Ducati is part of Volkswagen, but I sense that they give Ducati's a really very separate company, and Volkswagen, I wouldn't say just leaves them to their own devices. That would be simplistic, but it is a really separate branding and company branding entity. With Suzuki, the motorsport is the motorcycle, the motorsport. I'm only presuming, I was going to see if you put me right here. This is a very large company that had to give up the motor car element in the US, but has worldwide has a very quite large presence in motor cars, in the marine, in various aspects, very similar to Yamaha and Honda. They've got a lot of fingers in a lot of pies. It's just it's a major Japanese-based manufacturer. Did I do wrong by pointing? I just wanted to point that out to the listeners and viewers.
People in America really don't have a grasp on how big Suzuki is. It is immense. They run something like 60% of the market in India with their product. Suzuki's kind of modus operandi is to introduce their entry-level cars to burgeoning markets. So when a country is starting to climb out of poverty and people are starting to get cars, Suzuki shows up with all these entry-level cars and they seize the market. I mean, they just flood it with their product at a very good price point, and they just have market share like crazy. That's part of the reason Toyota joined them and does business with them, because they're kind of sharing their hybrid technology with Suzuki for the future, and Suzuki's helping to introduce some of Toyota's models to these markets that they have these giant holds on. It's an amazing, when you get down to it, it's really an amazing thing. And to answer your question about the Volkswagen thing, to steal words directly from the people I worked with at Volkswagen, they believe in a thing called brand sanctity. That was their phrase. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed working for their organization. Like, if I could roll back the time a little bit, I'd almost love to do a little more with them. They have Lamborghini, Bentley, Porsche, all these brands, and Volkswagen will give you anything you need. Like, they'll give you all the tools you need for your own success. As long as you're experiencing success and growth, they kind of stay out of your backyard and they let you maintain your culture, maintain your production methods, but they're there to help you when you need that boost. And it's like the perfect business combination to me of how you let people experience success.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So you moved to Suzuki,
Mm-hmm.
a better offer. But then I sense with the couple of conversations and the couple of hints, I think you found the corporate culture there difficult to deal with. Because you also got hired to develop, and this is how you've ended up helping Lifter, running your own agency, because they hired you for training, to build on, to find a training platform. And that's how you got introduced to WordPress, because you were looking at all types of platforms. And and they hired you to develop internal training for their dealers. I'm probably
So,
wrong
yeah,
about this, but you tell the story. Go on.
they had a SCORM-based proprietary learning platform. And it was built years and years and years ago. And it was not, the user had a great user experience, but us on the back end trying to manage it and build it, it was a little bit of a nightmare. A modern SCORM platform, you load up your zip file and it takes that course and it, expands it and makes it run online. This particular platform, we couldn't load up zip files. We had to send them to the vendor. The vendor would kind of break apart the package and stitch it back together in this platform. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. It would take us weeks to get material online for our learners. And besides being not very functional for what I wanted, it was hugely expensive. And huge, like a lot of money. I'm not going to share numbers, but it was a lot of money. And I thought, with my work in WordPress and the stuff I had done as an agency previous to my OEM work, I'm like, there's got to be a better answer to this. And so I did the research. I looked at LearnDash. I looked at Tutor LMS. I looked at Lifter LMS. I started working on some of my own projects in Lifter LMS, and I really liked the company culture at Lifter. So I proposed building this thing for Suzuki and Lifter, and they turned it down. They said they weren't ready for that kind of change, at that space and time. And I remember that's right around when I was on your show the first time. We were talking about that when I first left Suzuki. I ended up building a package for them in the marine division to help with dealers. And so the thing to remember is Suzuki is a big company, but each of those elements is a big company in its own right. So they have Suzuki Marine, Suzuki Power Sports, Suzuki Automotive. And I ended up building a project for the marine division on Lifter LMS. And I really liked the way that it came out. And I really liked the bottom line. Like from a corporate position, to look at something that could have been over 6 figures to something that costs less than 10 grand to implement, it's like, I hate to say it's a no-brainer because I think that insults people that make other decisions, but I could not wrap my head around why a corporation wouldn't want to save 90%.
Shall we, because I want to touch the point, because I think you brought up a really interesting element and it's linked to the next question, really. And we can, so what are some of the major lessons you've learned connected to running your WordPress agency? And I just want to put this, I think when you're dealing, this is my observation, when you're dealing with larger organizations, let's say over 50 people, let's say I'm just pulling this out of the ether, really, over the 1 to 5 million gross turnover per year, and from 1 to 50 person, when you're dealing with large organizations, I think their mindset is totally different. Obviously, they don't want to be totally ripped off, but their really concern is not solely price driven to some extent. It's about, will the thing do what it says, and will the support be ongoing, and will it integrate with our other systems?
Yep.
That's their mindset. Am I wrong about that? Because you've got more experience in some ways. I have done work for larger organizations, but I've not actually worked on the executive level in an organization like that. So what I've just outlined, is there any truth to it, Kurt?
There's truth to that, but there's so many other layers that go into it, Jonathan. You got to remember, at most corporate entities that are larger, the people that got to the vice president's desk or the president's desk, they've been there for a while in most cases, and some of those dudes are just trying to get to the end. And that's one of the saddest things about my corporate experience, is that you'll see people that are, you have potential, we could change this, we could really ramp this up, we can make this better for the people. And they're like, no, we're not ready for that kind of change yet. Let's just stay the course. Let's just, because they just want to squeak to the end of their term so they can get their retirement and get out.
Well, it's risk management, isn't it?
It's absolute risk management. And the other side of the coin, like, and I know this for a fact, when I was talking to my vice president at Suzuki, the reason I looked at other platforms besides the WordPress and making Lifter myself for the company, they flat out said, you work for us. We don't want to put all these cookies in your cookie jar. You know, what happens if you leave? What happens if this? What happens if that? You know, and so we had to start looking at other vendors like Bridge, Learn-Upon, SumTotal, and some other options for LMS providers at the corporate level, so that the corporation wouldn't be dependent upon me to maintain this thing internally.
Which in some ways is an understandable position, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can understand the logic of it, can't you?
Oh, I do. Absolutely. Yeah. But even when you look at those pricey things, those would have been great savings to that company at that time, but they just didn't want to make the change. And you run into that a lot when you get into corporate. When you hear other entrepreneurs talk about how corporations are slow to make decisions or slow to make changes, it's not always based on a spreadsheet. It's not always based on a lot of it's just what's the survival technique to get to the end of that career mark and leave it for someone else to take care of. And that sounds like a horrible thing to say about people, but that's just the truth of it.
No, because, you know, I do a lot of, increasingly I've been doing more and more business to business outreach. And one of the criteria I utilize LinkedIn is I look for job change as a criteria to touch base with them, because that's when there's the possibility of change being enacted. It's cruel. But so what are some of the other lessons you've learned by running a WordPress agency?
If I think back to the beginning of it, Jonathan, I think the best advice to give people thinking about doing it themselves would be, you have to know your niche. You have to know who are you serving and what's your offer going to be. Because when I came out, Jonathan, I was helping startups. I was referred to a lot of customers through the Economic Development Center in South Albuquerque. So I had a lot of incoming new businesses, and they didn't have budgets. So I ended up pumping out a ton of mediocre websites, you know, getting them up, just 4 or 5 page sites, just getting them up. The problem is you end up with hundreds of websites. And when you look at your bank account, you're like, I don't even know if I can pay rent. Like, you know, you're working. And I think at some level, you know, you have to start to recognize, what's my skill set? What is my offer? And how does this thing scale or grow?
I think a lot of people in the WordPress freelance, and then if they want to go a lot of freelancers do not want to go down the agency route because they do not want to have to manage people. So, which is totally understandable. I've chose to have I hire freelancers, and then I try and build a relationship with a small team of people that I have relationships with ongoing. But a lot of people don't even want to do that. They just want a freelancer. But I think everybody's been there, that you just take on the work that is available. But what you've got to attempt to do is exactly what you've outlined. You've got to find what type of customer, what type of industry, what type of scenario you seem to click with, and that varies with each freelancer, developer, a quasi agency owner. It just varies. But the sooner you can find that niche, the better I think it's going to be. I think question 3, I think we touched upon it in around question 2, really, because it was what you didn't touch was because I think your relationship with Suzuki ended because they basically decided that training wasn't that important. It could be removed completely.
Yeah, training's over.
And passed on to the dealer network and let them do whatever they wanted to do. Is that? I think you said they just got rid of the whole department.
Yeah, and I can't exactly say it like just leave it up to the dealer and they'll figure it out, right? But they still have training material that they make somehow, some way. But I used to run a team of 5 people. And I had, I had someone that was a e-learning specialist, and then, a guy that wrote technical journals, and because we had to do all the service manuals and journals and emails and all that too. And so that whole department got shut down. In 2020, right before COVID, they closed a bunch of things. They closed down product development. They closed down training. They closed down the internal customer service lines. They just shut down a bunch of stuff. And so when I left Suzuki, I wasn't angry. Business is business, So
it's a flicker that you never know what's coming.
Yeah. So I wasn't angry, but I said, okay, am I going to get another corporate job? Because now I'd done corporate for 10 years. Am I getting another corporate job, or am I going to relaunch MananaNoMas and go after this thing, with a fever pitch? And I tried both. I tried getting work, and I tried relaunching the agency. And during COVID, getting work was not happening. So I just kept taking every deal I could get with MananaNoMas. And here we are. I'm your co-host. I work directly with Lifter LMS, and I've got a couple of really great projects under my belt.
Yeah. I like working with other people. I know some people that are highly intelligent, but for various reasons they are incapable of working in a group scenario. I don't think I'm one of those. I am an independent spirit, but I believe that there should be honest discussion in a group of people, and then a collective decision made. And outside that decision, you shouldn't rubbish the people that made the decision, but there should be honest discussion in private, and there should be collective decision making, and then there should be an agreement about how criteria should be, how we measure is our decision making based on reality. I think any other system is dictatorial and delusionary based, but I'm amazed about how many organizations, business don't run on those basic principles. They say they are run on those principles, but they're not. I don't know
if practice many aren't. Yeah.
But
there's a big difference between what's said, what's printed, and what's done.
But I think leadership is essential. But that leadership should come, it should be it's the basis of the British political system, cabinet government. You have a prime minister, but you're supposed to have a cabinet, and there should be a discussion of all policies. And the prime minister and the people around him are the kind of the front of the cabinet, the people that explain. But that's all broken down for various reasons. That no longer exists in Britain, but I don't think it exists in a lot of companies now. I'm not going to go in, but it's just my observation. We're going to go for our break. Hopefully I wasn't boring you there, listeners and viewers. I was waffling a little bit, but I think I've kept it on topic. We're going to go for our break. It's been a fascinating discussion so far. I've got some other great questions for Gert. We will be back in a few moments, folks.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Lifter LMS, the leading learning management system solution for WordPress. If you or your client are creating any kind of online course, training-based membership website, or any type of e-learning project, Lifter LMS is the most secure, stable, well-supported solution on the market. Go to lifterlms.com and save 20% at checkout with coupon code podcast20. That's podcast20. Enjoy the rest of your show.
We're coming back, folks. We've had a great discussion about working for larger international organizations, about Kirk's moving to WordPress, or coming back to WordPress, what he's learned. I think it's been fab. I just want to point out, if you want to support the show, be a real member of the tribe, why don't you think about hosting your clients' websites with WP Engine? Basically, we specialize in Buddy Boss, Lifter LMS, LearnDash, larger membership websites, community-focused websites. We provide really great hosting that won't stress you out at honest prices, plus a suite of plugins that you can utilize on your customer projects, plus a customized interface so you can actually manage your projects yourself. It's a great setup. To find out more, and we'd love you to become part of the tribe, is go over to wp-tonic.com/partners, wp-tonic/partners, and have a look at what we got to offer, and have a chat with me, and we'll see if we're a good fit. So on we go. What are some of the lessons? I think if you kind of mentioned I call it nicheifying. I don't think there's actually a word nicheifying. There's niche, but I created nicheifying, and I just love the sound of it. And I've done that consistently, make my own words. So I call it nicheifying. So what I was reflecting back a little bit, because it's the time of year to do that type of thing. You've been my co-host for almost 12 months now, which is unbelievable how time flies. And you've dealt with my madness. I think one of my strengths is you can have honest discussion with me. I might be deluded there, but hopefully you agree with that. And I can change my position if faced with facts, can't I? But what are some of the things you've learned over the 12, 18 months so far that you might have not have considered that's coming your focus a bit?
I think if we really focus on 12 to 18 months, Jonathan, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned, especially in the WordPress space, is not to get too distracted with that shiny object syndrome, right? We've had full site editing rollout, full steam ahead, with the 6.3 launch of WordPress. AI is the buzzword that everyone talks about. And you want to be knowledgeable about these things, but you can't be consumed by them if you're trying to grow and scale an agency. Like I personally feel if I focus on my relationships and I focus like on the customer groups that I'm trying to approach or infiltrate, if I focus on the relationships and I excel at the basics, and for my basics, it's all my projects are on time and under budget. Like that's kind of like my niche. If I had one, would be on time and under budget. I don't mess with my clients like that. So if I focus on those basics and I don't get overly distracted, by these shiny objects, I'm able to grow and scale at a pretty steady rate.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned is that there is a kind of semi-culture, and it's totally understandable, of blaming, because there are a lot of clients. There's what I call semi-crazy and there's full crazy. The full crazies do come on your radar, and if you take them on, good luck to you. They are out there, and you might take them on because financially you've got no choice, or you're dealing with somebody, and then I've dealt with somebody initially, and then after the contract signed, I've just been passed over to the crazy. All right. So you always need to know who you're going to be working with, because that's happened to me.
Yeah.
And it's not a great experience. The other thing is, but the fact you've got to take into account, and I've learned this the hard way, if you're listening to this and you're a freelancer and an agency owner. If you're an agency owner, you should know this, but I'm probably talking more to the freelancer. If there's a vacuum, that vacuum will be filled. And if you do not have a contract and a clear internal process, the vacuum will be taken up by the customer. And the customer, the client, doesn't know what they're doing. You should know. There should be process from the beginning, every part of the process of building out a solution to a business, you need process. If there's no process, that process will be filled by the client's process. What are your views of what I've just outlined, Kurt?
I'm thinking that you read the inside cover to my leadership book I just published. In Action Leadership from the Edge, that's exactly what I talk about. I talk about, leadership being an action item, right? And that if you don't embrace your natural call to leadership, you create that vacuum, you create that leadership void. And the universe hates voids. They get filled, and it's the same with work. Exactly what you said. If you don't forecast milestones or tasks throughout a project, if you're not managing the project, scope creep takes over. And next thing you know, the customers, doubled, tripled, quadrupled your workload. And you really don't have much to stand on other than to get the project done and get out from underneath it, which in some cases is very difficult to do.
Yes, especially the medium-sized projects.
Yeah.
They become extremely messy, and they become real, true financial loss leaders. Obviously, a smaller project, you can still take a financial hit, but it's only going to be marginal, and you hope future work. But when you get into the medium-sized projects, they can be a substantial financial hit if you get substantial scope creep, which will happen in a vacuum. You're deluded, because you've got to understand, and I just want to put this to you, to see if you agree with me or you think I'm not being incorrect. There is we've got to be realistic here. And if you're listening to this podcast, I love your feedback about this, listeners and viewers. We don't get enough feedback in this podcast from you. I love you to outreach to Kirk or myself about what guests, what subjects you would like us to discuss into 2024, because we just do not get enough feedback from you, tribe. We need to get more feedback from you. But I think between the 3 to 10,000 mark, I think the type of clientele that come to most WordPress agencies, they're looking for a solution, and they got to feel that you have the ability to do the solution. But they're also looking to get the maximized value from you. We've got to be brutally frank about this.
Yeah.
They're looking to get the best deal for their buck possible. So they're shopping, but they're always making a judgment call. We're shopping, but can that individual, that agency produce what they say they're going to produce at the quality that we're looking for? But they're always shopping, and they're always looking for what I call maximum value. Larger jobs, it's more ongoing relationship, ongoing other factors. So in that matrix that I've just outlined, if you have a void, that void will be filled in with extra value requests. They will just pour in. What's your response to what I just outlined? Is there any truth, or what's your own take on what I've just outlined?
You nailed that in the real world pretty well, Jonathan. I mean, if people read between your words, they should understand there needs to be a little bit more of a panic in the discovery process. People, I think, skip a lot of the discovery process and don't get the nitty-gritty questions answered. They're in such a hurry to close the deal and get a deposit or swipe a credit card. They miss it.
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. I wasn't being rude, but the only problem with what I'm saying is that a lot of customers do not know.
They don't even know what they want.
They don't even know what they want. So it's really even if you're on the bigger jobs, folks, at WP-Tonic, we do charge for paid discovery. We do offer discounts if the project is. We try and be fair to clientele, but we do insist because it. But there's a lot of people that have sold courses and sold solution to agency owners that paid discovery will solve all the problems. It doesn't, listeners, tribe members, it doesn't, because it doesn't deal with a lot of clients that don't know what they need. They have no idea, and it only occurs to them like in the middle part of the project, and then that leads to what I call honest scope creep. There's dishonest, where they always had an agenda which they never told you about. That's dishonest scope creep. But the bulk of clientele, it's not what I call dishonest scope creep. It's that they never knew from day one what, and can you see where I'm coming from, Kirk, or do you think I'm on the route there?
Oh, no, there's definitely that. That's why having project management in place and a way to track tasks and milestones is so important, and to do updates along the way, because that honest scope creep is real, right? And when they change the scope of the project in that process, like say you do a review and you say, this is where you add in the customer information. And then they go, oh, well, we want to just upload that with a CSV file. And then you go, okay, well, that's different. That's a different function. So if you want to automate this process, we can add that to the project, right? Because it wasn't originally scoped as part of the project. So as long as you have these meetings and these changes with scope creep, and you acknowledge that scope creep or additional scope, then you can play with your deadlines and your budgets, or you can, take away from part of the project in another area. But if you think you're going to sign up a client and work on something for 4 months and give it to them and say it's done, at the end, the chances of them being happy is pretty slim, because what they expect and what you built are probably 3 different things.
Yeah, you just touched on something else I want to put to you based on my experience. If a project in the website, I'm not talking about ongoing services like support, social media, copywriting, and what I classify now as digital PR services. I'm talking about web development and design projects, folks. If you're looking at anything that cannot be finished between 3 and 6 months, I've had projects mostly driven by clients that have ghosted, that have disappeared for months. That you really got to have that in your contract and have penalty payments written in your contract, because I've let that go. This is in my past, folks. And the project is extended for 9 months to 10 months. They never end well. They always are filled with scope creep, and you always end up the client blaming you. They never accept that they ghosted you for 3, 4, 5 months. Or what it normally happens is they ghost you for 6 weeks, and then there's a panic, and then they ghost you another 6, 7 weeks, and then there's another panic, and it's an ongoing pattern of micro ghosting, as I call it. That's what I call it. I call it micro ghosting, right? They always end up blaming the agency. So now, especially if you're dealing with organisations that have committees or multiple decision makers, the set 50 or the set 50-50 or the third setup do not work, because you get into an extended build-up consultation scenario. You're better off going with a retainer, that row over retainer. And what I mean is, you have a set retainer every month, and you keep a record of hours from your team, and you allow the hours to row over to the next month, and you agree. They give you a kind of layout of the project, and you say, well, that normally takes 6 months, or that takes 12 months, and it's done with a row over retainer, and that normally ends more favorably. But these fixed price projects, a fixed price project that goes over then 6 months, based on my experience, Kurt, is doomed to failure. It's doomed, and the clientele that micro ghost, never accept their dysfunctionality. They always place the dysfunctionality upon the freelancer and the agency owner. What's your response to what I've just outlined?
Well, you nailed that. And it's, as the agency owner, when you're doing these update meetings, you constantly have to, this is so awkward. A lot of people think that as the agency, the customer is the project manager, because the customer is going to be like,
if you think that, you're really going to go down a bad way.
You're totally out. Like, if you are the agency, you are the project manager, and you can only build what you have content to build with, right? So either you're getting paid to make the content, or the client is responsible to give you content to put into this structure.
Yeah, so, but that used to be a very painful, because a lot of the projects, especially the individuals below 10,000 that were looking for maximum value, always wanted to write the copy. Then if you wanted to hire anybody that was US based, that had any idea, it got very expensive. And there was always that is not so bad now. It's one, using AI, you can get copy. It's not going to be fantastically sales orientated, but it will allow you to get the job done, and the clientele can either modify it, or we can hire somebody. I don't think copywriters should be that worried. I think if you're lower level, you've got things to worry about. But I think if you can add value through sales orientated copy that actually works, and advisory elements to your packages, I think you still got a decent way of making a living if you're copy focused. But that always used to be a extremely painful discussion between the 3,000 to 10,000 price point. But I think AI helps solve that to some degree. But I don't want to overemphasize. It's not the holy grail, but at least it stops you, because that was a very painful scenario, because we produce the content, we're struggling, we can't. There are 1,000 excuses, isn't there?
Yeah, and that's the stuff that you can build all the structure and have the automations in place and the templates, the containers where you want them. But if they don't agree on the content and it goes over 30, 60, 90 days, you are on a pathway for disaster.
Well, the more time this project needs, the more vacuum there is, the more scope for scope creep, the more the clientele. I'm paying this money out. I'm giving this guy, this woman, this team a load of money. We've got no website. It's just bleeding us. They won't accept that they never provided the copy. They will never accept that they're consistently micro ghost the agency, the freelancer. They won't, none of that. And if you bring it up, that's when it gets heated, because they won't accept any of it. We've paid you. You're the one that's supposed to have produced the job. Then it gets Nancy, as I say. It gets ugly. I'm up for it, actually. You've seen me in operation, haven't you?
Yeah.
I'm prepared to spell it out if it's necessary. But I didn't used to be that. I used to avoid it, but it does not work, folks. What's your response to that?
My response is, we were going to talk about how people would get their foot in the door with bigger projects, and now in the last 10 minutes, we've scared people away from wanting bigger projects.
But I think we're having an honest discussion, which a lot of podcasts, a lot of so-called experts, advising agencies, freelancers, they're just full of shit. They're just full of shit, folks. They're just giving you. But if you have processes and you work on it, things will go easier for you. Yeah, let's go on to the final couple of questions, because I don't want it to be too negative. I don't think it has, actually. I think we just told people, based on my honest and your honest experience, what the realities are.
Well, I think one statement that I hear from a lot of other agency owners, and because we network with a lot of people, Jonathan, is almost everybody has experienced small customers, people with a lack of budget, generally turn into a real pain in the rear end to finish and get done. And then it seems like the more people pay, the smoother the project goes. Like every time I up my game and I get better quality clients and higher budgets, the projects are much easier to maintain. And so, if anything else, hopefully that's an inspiration for people that are looking for scale and growth to go, oh, well, if I sell bigger packages, maybe they are
I
better.
see where you're coming from, and then you hear that a lot. But I think it's also about process. If you have concrete processes and you have proper contracts, and you have, the only thing is there's 2 to 3 people that consistently sell membership solutions to agencies that say paid discovery will solve all your problems, and it's a lie. It is important. We do it. I do it for larger. We have certain price triggers that if the person has to pay up front, we don't ask for discovery because they're set packages, packagized services. But if it's fully custom projects, we have over a certain price point, listeners, we have paid discovery, but it's not an elixir that will solve all your problems, because it doesn't solve the problem the client that honestly doesn't know what they're looking for. Right? It just won't. True. And those, I'm not going to name them, but there's about 3 people that regularly turn up that got a new course, and it's always about, if paid discovery will solve all your problems, it won't. Yeah. So on to the next thing. What business tools and services that you utilize daily, weekly, monthly that help you run your agency and help you do your work? Can you name a few names and new things that come to your head?
Well, one of the tools that I use that you might think is awkward to bring up is I got one of those Remarkable 2 tablets, that you can write on for your notes and stuff. And I take really great notes from every business meeting that I have. And those notes are completely searchable all within that tablet.
I don't, because that's down to my dyslexia. I've got a pretty good memory, but it's not fallible as I get older, and I'm old now. But
yeah, I prefer to write and draw my notes rather than
type. You should always do that. I wish I could do that, but AI has helped me enormously. I've invested a lot of money and learning, and I think the last year the AI tools that I invested are really paying off dividends to me. And we might have an internal discussion in the new year about certain AI tools that I've utilized that really made a difference in my agency. Give us some feedback, listener, tribe members, if you want to hear that show. Otherwise, you're not going to get it. So the tablet, anything else?
Yeah. It's the tools that we all use, but we take for granted now. So StreamYard, we're doing this right now. I run a ton of meetings on StreamYard. I run a ton in Zoom. And then I also do Whereby for meetings inside my own websites, right? So sometimes I want the meeting to be, Zoom, somewhere like a big room of people off brand. And then other times I really want to drive people to my site. And so sometimes I put the meeting inside my site using Whereby. I also, listen to a lot of ebooks to try and keep myself motivated and on target, because I work remotely. And sometimes that lack of interaction, in person with people, you just want to hear some other words, some other advice, some other ideas. And so I'll listen to Audible, and I'll go through a lot of audiobooks while I'm doing stuff. And then I have my own podcast. The MananaNoMas podcast is done on Spotify for podcasters. So I use that tool. And then LinkedIn. I meet a lot of folks through LinkedIn, and I'm not going to say I monetize LinkedIn. I hate when people say that. But
it's kind of isn't it?
Yeah. I do leverage the networking. Yeah. And then obviously there's the WordPress and the tech stack that, you and I are both familiar with, and how we build our products.
The thing is, I do specific industries, and I've upped my LinkedIn game, because you said and I pay for Premier, and the past few months I've been upping my game, but it's in particular industry sectors. But the outreach, what I don't mind people approaching me through LinkedIn. What I hate is them trying to sell to me straight away. What
Lots
I
of
mean by
spam.
that, I'm upfront with it, but I always try and offer some value. I try and
Yep.
offer a free PDF or a free resource. I think it's totally fair to say I'm looking, do you want a discussion? This is how we can help you. But also here's this free resource.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
because it might not be the right time. It's all about timing.
There is a
But
whole
the amount of
culture
people.
around LinkedIn.
Sorry, go on.
There's a whole culture around LinkedIn, and so many people are missing it. That cold email, in-mail thing that they offer that everyone spams you with. Do you want PMP training, or do you want to make 73 new appointments every month? Or that's garbage.
Yeah, but
And,
they don't. But I do a little bit of that. But I offer a PDF. I offer,
offer value.
I try and offer something to somebody, and if it isn't the right time, I'm not going to buzz you. And then you get these people that they don't they don't back off. You show no interest, and then it's 15 messages later, isn't it?
You got to block them.
Yeah, and in the end, you block them, don't you? So it's self-defeating, because also I think LinkedIn, because they're using automated systems, and LinkedIn is really trying to hit them hard, because they got to, because it will destroy LinkedIn as well. So on to our last question. Obviously, I'm English, never guess, would you? And I've been living in America, but I lived in England for 40 years, and I always see myself culturally as being very English. I've got no plans to going back to the UK, even though I've still got friends and family that I'm close to. It's just the weather, folks. It's just the weather in the winter is brutal, and anybody from England that tells you any different, they're a liar. So I'm a great fan of Doctor Who and the Time Machine. So if you had your own time machine and you could go back for an hour and just have over a beer, have a chat with yourself, would there be one or two things that you wish you had known at the beginning of your career that you understand now, Kurt?
Oh, Jonathan, I think there's one or two things, and I think, and this is probably more personal than the listeners are used to hearing, but I did not have enough confidence in myself as a young man. On the outside, I appeared gregarious and confident, but on the inside, like in third grade, someone said, "What do you want to do when you get older?" I said, I want to write a book. And they literally laughed at me and said, "You don't even like English class, dude. Why would you write a book?" And then if you remember the conversation we just had, publishing that book in 2007 is what led to my career in the OEM power sports world. So, if I would have dismissed the naysayers and the haters earlier in life, I probably would have experienced
There's a bloody lot of them, isn't there?
There is.
Unfortunately, there's some great people in WordPress, but there's some real shits in WordPress. You'd slightly disagree, but there is. Be honest, there's some real keyboard warriors that are out in the WordPress community that just get delight in just shitting on everything and everybody. And it's just depressing. But I've just chosen to, I think I've had a couple rants, but you look at the totality of how I've responded, I've just utilised that negative energy to refocus. Hopefully you would agree on that. I know you've had to deal with a couple shitty times with me when I've just ranted on, and so has Chris Badgers, who's a great friend. He's listened to a couple of times to my ranting. But in the totality, I've been proud about. But there is a certain group in the WordPress community that are total shits. I mean, they're awful people, and everybody knows them and tries to avoid them like the plague. But it is. But there's also some really fantastic people, isn't there? So, and I totally agree with you, because I had a terrible educational experience as a reasonably intelligent dyslexic. I was hated by my schools, hated by the establishment. That's why I've always had compassion for outsiders and people that struggle. because I've been there myself. Because if you don't fit into the system really makes it rough for you, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And everyone's got a different learning style, but the system doesn't appreciate that.
Nor does it want to know, does it?
Yeah, doesn't encourage it. And so when I look at things that were overcome and things that, that shaped my character, I wouldn't necessarily change events, even the negative events, because they're part of what make you who you are. But, I'm 56 now, Jonathan, and I seem like I'm just now coming out of my shell and recognizing my expertise in power sports, my expertise in leadership, my expertise in project management, but I did all these jobs for 40 years. And even as a 50-year-old person was like, I still felt like the child in the room.
Yeah, it's most strange. Just listen to me and Kirk, if you're a younger man or woman, find your niche, become a thought leader, build your tribe, build your community. It will pay dividends. It's the one thing that losing a corporate job, losing a major client, that can never be taken from you. So, Kirk, I think it's been a great Thanksgiving special. I think it's been a fabulous discussion. What's the best way for people to find, also find your podcast and also find more information about you in general, Kirk?
Yeah, the podcast is called MananaNoMas. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on Anchor, it's on all the big channels. I also publish all the episodes on my own site, MananaNoMas.com. We've got a pretty strong site there and a pretty strong offer. And I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great way to get in touch. Make the connection. I've got a LinkedIn strategy that does not spam you, so you're safe to hit a connection link, and we'll go that route.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Automatic replies when you connect, and you get automatic pitch. Oh my God, that's such a losing strategy, isn't it? It's such a loser, isn't it? Now, how can you support the show, folks? Well, basically just contact me or Kirk, and there's loads of ways. You can contact us on Twitter, leave a message on Twitter. You can contact us through LinkedIn, and you can contact us through the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. So there's great ways of contacting us. We need your more feedback from you about what kind of shows you and me and Kirk you want from us, what type of guests you want and what type of subjects you want from us. Give us that feedback. That'd be much appreciated. We will be back next week with another great interview. We'll see you soon. Bye.